The Department of Defense wants to be the Department of Pre-Crime, knowing if you've been bad or good by fingerprinting your brain, and child slavery in Ohio. It's SkyWatch TV for Tuesday, February 9th, 2016. I'm Derek Gilbert. First up, a Border Patrol official tells Congress that we might as well do away with our immigration laws altogether. Brandon Judd, who's the president of the National Border Patrol Council, said at a congressional hearing last week that Customs and Border Protection agents have been ordered not to arrest illegal immigrants or to order them to report to court for deportation hearings. Judd said the policy shift was prompted by the Obama administration's embarrassment that just over half the illegals ordered to report to court actually do. But even for those who aren't yet in court, things don't always go so well. At least 19 children were handed over to human traffickers by the Department of Health and Human Services. HHS flew the unaccompanied minors to an Ohio airport where they were met by sponsors approved by the department. However, when HHS went back to check on the children, the sponsor refused to allow them in, and that was the end of it. HHS said it didn't have the right to force the issue. A Senate subcommittee investigating this last week discovered that the children had been put to work on egg farms in and around Marion, Ohio, working 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. Every year, tens of thousands of children enter the United States without their parents or relatives. If they're taken into custody, they're designated UACs. The Office of Refugee Resettlement under the Health and Human Services Department is responsible for finding them temporary homes until immigration proceedings are resolved. HHS is required to make sure that they're protected from human traffickers and other abuse. But apparently HHS policy is only to run a background check on the sponsor on the application and not on any other adults living in the sponsor's home. The Senate investigation also found that the HHS process is unable to detect when a single sponsor or group of related sponsors are applying to take in multiple unrelated children. In other words, an instant workforce. Some 90,000 migrant children, most of them from Central America, have been placed with adult sponsors by the Department of Health and Human Services. Border control is becoming a real problem in Europe as well. Some there believe that closing borders between countries in the so-called Schengen zone could damage already fragile economies, perhaps costing as much as $100 billion over the next 10 years. The Schengen zone is an area in Europe where passports aren't required to travel from one country to another, sort of like traveling between states in the United States. But the immigration crisis has caused turmoil in Europe and led some members of the Schengen zone to put temporary border checks in place. In fact, EU officials will meet next month to decide whether they should suspend the Schengen agreement for 2 years until they get a handle on the immigration crisis. For example, Austria, which has suspended its participation in the Schengen zone, is up in arms after it became public knowledge last week that a 10-year-old boy was raped in a public swimming pool in Vienna in early December by an Iraqi immigrant. The attack wasn't reported immediately to protect the boy. His injuries, apparently severe enough that he required hospitalization. He was assaulted in one of the changing rooms at this swimming pool. The 20-year-old Iraqi man who had returned to the pool swimming and diving off the 3-meter board was arrested on the spot. He told police that he'd suffered a sexual emergency, that he'd become desperate because he hadn't been with a woman in 4 months because his wife and daughter were still back in Iraq. The man had emigrated to Europe through the Balkans in September. I don't expect that this man's sexual emergency excuse is going to fly with the Austrian public. In Germany, where there were 8,000 people at an anti-immigration rally in Dresden over the weekend, the head of the Domestic Intelligence Agency says they've received over 100 tips recently that members of ISIS have entered the country along with asylum seekers. Frankly, this is probably the worst kept secret of the year, and we still have more than 10 months to go. The Islamic State has been telling the West that they would do exactly this for quite some time now. And yet, an Arabic newspaper based out of London quotes a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Refugees as saying the U.S. aims to take in more asylum seekers from Syria in the years ahead. Ann Richards, who was in London last week at a conference for Syrian refugees, told reporters that President Obama had raised the number of refugees entering the U.S. from 70,000 to 85,000, and that within that number should be at least 10,000 from Syria. And efforts are being made to raise that number. Richards said the administration tries to remind Americans that most of us are descendants of refugee immigrants. And frankly, she does have a point there. And while I am truly thankful that I am here in the United States and not some of the places I could have been if not for certain decisions by my ancestors, say Moldova for one, I think the Native Americans that we have displaced might have a few insightful things they can share with us about the wisdom of allowing large groups of people into the country who have no desire to assimilate into your culture. It's like my Welsh ancestors might have a thing or two to say about the Saxons who drove them out of Britain. Now, one way to prevent trouble, of course, is to know what people are going to do before they actually do it. Like the Department of Pre-Crime in the movie Minority Report, the Tom Cruise film from several years ago. Well, the Department of Defense is actually working on developing these types of tools. They're asking contractors to develop algorithms that can mine through the mountains of data that we generate on social media, our posts to Facebook and Twitter and Google+, Pinterest, Snapchat, Instagram, Tumblr, Vine, etc., and figure out from all of that information what we as individuals and what we collectively as groups are thinking and planning to do. This was the upshot of a new funding opportunity announcement from the Office of Naval Research. Now, maybe I'm just slightly paranoid, but it seems to me just a little creepy that the military is putting out this call rather than the Justice Department, which would be creepy enough. But reading between the lines of the information being published by the Department of Defense, things coming out from DARPA and other agencies, it appears that military leadership is very concerned with social crisis, civil unrest, civil collapse, which, frankly, given some of the economic indicators out there, is not an unrealistic possibility. But this kind of disruption, both overseas and here at home. Now, perhaps developing ways to counter perceived threats in advance through preemptive counterinsurgency actions, and of course, propaganda put out by the government to kind of guide our thoughts in more acceptable directions. But police departments around the country are getting in on this as well. An unknown number of departments in America beta testing software called Beware. This Beware software analyzes your social media activity along with property records, records of people in your social network, friends, families, coworkers, to develop a threat score. Now, forget your credit score. Your threat score may be the important number for you to know in the future. Police officials say that such tools can help provide critical information to thwart terror attacks, mass shootings, and so forth. Although this is still unproven, I just have to wonder, how has your threat score changed if you've watched this far into the program? It doesn't take a lot of imagination to imagine how this could be really, really useful someday to a one-world government. Now, if that isn't enough, there's another new technology being developed for pre-crime detection, and that is brain fingerprinting. A couple of alert readers sent me this article a couple of weeks ago, and I finally found a place where it made sense to include this in a program. Brain fingerprinting, developed about 25 years ago, uses an electroencephalograph, or EEG, to determine whether specific information is stored in a person's brain based on electrical responses in the brain to certain keywords and phrases. The marketer of this technology claims an error rate of less than 1% in laboratory tests and in field tests conducted by the CIA, the FBI, and the U.S. Navy. And according to the marketer, the FBI found that brain fingerprinting was applicable in 85 to 90% of criminal and civil cases, whereas fingerprinting and DNA analysis were only applicable in 1 to 2% of cases. Now, the FBI hasn't confirmed that, but again, the ability to read your brain, in a sense, to determine what you're really thinking and what information you might be hiding in your brain. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how that might be useful and abused in the wrong hands. Well, on to happier thoughts. Exciting news at SkyWatch TV. We told you about this yesterday, and we'll talk more in depth about this tomorrow, exactly why we're asking for your help in this project. Our documentary film, Inhuman, The Next and Final Phase of Man Is Here, has been nominated for a Telly Award. Now, the Tellys have been around for 37 years. This is the 37th annual. And while the judges will adjudicate the entries themselves, there is a separate award for the people's choice. If you go to SkyWatchTV.com, you'll see in the very top of the webpage there a link where you can go to the Telly Awards website and rate our film. And you'll also get a free 10-minute sample of the documentary that way. Anyway, log on to SkyWatchTV.com, follow the link to the Telly Awards, and we thank you in advance for your help. Tonight on SkyWatch TV, you get to meet the two new members of the SkyWatch TV team, Josh and Christina Peck. You'll see that on SkyWatch TV tonight on the Christian Television Network. That's 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Glory Star Satellite Channel 117, Dish Network Channel 267, Direct TV Channel 376. And if you don't have satellite TV, you can watch the video stream at the Christian Television Network's website. That's ctnonline.com. Now, we really appreciate and depend on your financial support, but we like to thank you with something tangible. And during the month of February, our gift to you for your financial gift of any amount is this cross. And this cross stands 8 inches tall, displays John 3:16, which, when you get right down to it, is the very heart of the gospel. For God so loved the world. If you'd like to find out how to donate to SkyWatch TV, just click skywatchtv.com/donate. And your mouse click can help us in other ways. When we post things to the internet, they go here: Facebook, Twitter, our website, and of course our YouTube channel. And by sharing, liking, and especially in the case of YouTube, subscribing, the word gets around about the news that we're trying to share, the changes that are happening in the world around us. My website, my Twitter feed, my Facebook page are posted here, and my email address is crawling across your screen right now. Send your comments, questions, and suggestions to me at dgilbert@skywatchtv.com. And thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.